was talking to a friend of mine who works at Amazon. He's like, "Oh man, Echo's so neat." I'm like, "Echo, I had not heard of that." And so I went home and looked it up online, and I got one. It's basically, if you don't know it, it's a Bluetooth speaker. It sits there, it hooks up to your Wi-Fi, and it trivially does text to speech. But it does it very conveniently, as opposed to like Siri or Katana, where you need to explicitly talk into a device that's not, you don't usually have your phone in hand, ready for that at a whim. Because it sits in your living room, you're able to go, Alexa, play Pandora, and it'll start playing Pandora for you, or add this to my shopping list. And some of that is kind of gimmicky, but I gotta say that kind of stuff is damn cool. And they have a fund of $100 million if you go look online, where they're funding development for stuff using Echo or Alexa. And looking at the SDKs for it, it's really, really, really easy to trivially do voice to text or text to voice using their SDK, their programming interface. And so there's already a couple games now coming out for Echo, choose your own adventure type things, and even some RPG type games. And you can imagine anything that would be fun with a dungeon master done right. As that kind of stuff gets better, it would be fun with being voice enabled. So voice controls for like action games and stuff, it's always going to be tricky because if it's competitive, then you may well lag behind other folks who are doing things. It's a faster interface to use most physical interfaces. The for stuff where you're playing against the environment, hey, there's no competition there, so it's okay if there's a bit more delay. And so I think you can even see that kind of interface in that game otherwise. But absolutely voice enabled gaming. It's here to an extent, but in limited fashion. But it's neat enough, I think, that we'll see more and more of it. And the tech for it just got so much easier too to use. I did voice recognition stuff. I was an AI researcher in my youth, pre-doing games, and so we did voice recognition. We did natural language processing. We did like vision, where you take stereo vision and a couple cameras and then see things, deep in depth. So it's amusing to see a lot of that stuff really coming online and being commercialized. Oh, good Lord, what is it, like 23 years later or something? I'm freaking old. Yeah, 23 years later, you're now seeing more of that. Of course, we also had VR headsets back then, too, so hey, there you go.
Um, a question of
Mm,
my own is, what do you think about players who get banned from
mm,
games for what could be like considered a cheat, but not really? For instance, like I love
mm.
Aeon. I
Good
love
game.
Aeon, but I couldn't use the
Mm.
keyboard, so I used my controller program,
Which,
and somebody reported it as
yep,
a bot, and I got banned for
yep.
that. So what's your opinion on that?
Hey, if you want, I can probably get you on bad. I got enough friends over there. The, the, so it's tricky because the botting destroys games pretty quickly. The
Yeah.
because and it's not always as simple as if you design well for it, you can avoid a lot of the BS with it. But it's super ubiquitous in part because there's so much money to be made at it, and by people who really don't care if they ruin your game, and they don't care if they ruin it for the players, and they don't really care if they ruin it for the developers. They don't care if they ruin it for the publisher. Like they don't care. They just want to go make a buck on it. And so, and almost any way you detect cheaters, other people are going to get caught by that kind of stuff who aren't actually cheating. And so, the and now you've taken some of your most devoted fans and you've pissed them off, or you've kicked them actively out of your game. And you hope that that's a small percentage, but it's some. And so there's no trivial answer to the rights and wrongs on any of that. The You're best off as a developer with designing your game so that if people are farming, if people are botting, if people are doing things you don't want to have happen in your game, that your game is not incenting it. That's not the most profitable way to play it from a player perspective or from a farmer perspective. The But conversely, the I don't know. There ain't a super easy answer on that one. I think for us, I mean, probably everybody's been banned from something at this point for stuff that they didn't damn well deserve. And the Because I've been banned out of stuff occasionally. Um, for a variety of reasons. I mean, often it's just as simple as, hey, you goofed up when you made the search that was going to crawl through your database looking for the stuff you were doing to find that sort of thing. It's massively expensive though. I know when I was at NC, I've talked about this in like an economy talk I gave in Brighton at a game developer conference there called Develop. When we did, I looked at our numbers in 2004-ish, and Lineage at the time was making, I want to say about 250 million a year in U.S. dollars for as a huge MMO in Korea. Lineage One never hit very high in the U.S., but it's huge. It's like national religion in Korea, and people are paying us about 250 million a year, and the eBay market for games, or people are paying each other for items inside the game, was about $1 billion. Meaning that what a fantastically huge amount of money that people are willing to spend on a game you made, in which case that's pretty darn cool in its own right. But secondly, it means that people are willing to pay a heck of a lot more than you actually charge them. That's why I think you've seen so many quote unquote free to play games. It's because it lets you better tap into that when you're fervent about a game, tapping into being able to invest money in it and or to save you time in it, to get more enjoyment out of it. It taps into the fact that people are willing to pay a lot more than one might think to do that. Because at the time, again, they were paying us, 200 million plus, and they were paying 5 times that to other people. So that's why you see so many scams. That's why you see many frauds. It's why you see that is because the business of doing that kind of stuff in some ways is bigger than the business of making the games themselves. Crazy as that may seem, the numbers support that to an extent. Pretty nuts.
Another question from my friend Wizzy is okay, this is a big question. A double whammy. No Man's
Cool
Sky,
concept.
which is a huge sandbox. He says, but it's an old school game. He wants to know if you've seen the
Yeah, I've
trailer.
seen the trailer.
Sorry, the trailer for Battalion 1944, where you get together to make old rifle shooters rather than just one of the walls. To blast
Yeah,
each
and
other.
so let's hit those in order. So No Man's Sky I think is killer. I love procedural stuff. When I first started coding, I read the source code for like Omega and NetHack and Larn and Rogue and a lot of those old school NetHack games. The That's how I learned when I was in high school. I learned Pascal, and then I learned C going into the end of high school, and then learned C++. I read the Omega source is kind of what originally got me into that. Omega's cool too. And so so I've loved procedural since day one, because as a designer and a programmer, it's kind of the marriage of that. It's like, hey, you can use all your technical skills to make stuff that feels good coming out of the tail end of that. It's part of why I respected, Diablo 1 or those kind of roguelike games for doing such a good job of embedding handcrafted content within randomly generated content. That's an art form that, when done right, feels really good. And so No Man's Sky, I don't know if you've seen it, but it's like that to the nth degree, where they randomly generate.
I actually
What's
haven't.
that?
I haven't seen No Man's
Oh,
Sky,
dude, it's
so I have to
cool.
check it out.
It's done by a core team of like 5 or 6 guys in England, and they procedurally generate everything from where the galaxies are all laid out, to the planets themselves, to the creatures on the planet, to the ferns and the cave systems, and you name it, where it is just massively high variance. And so it's potentially really interesting. What remains to be seen, and maybe it's been proven because I've had my eye on them for a couple of years, but I haven't looked at them super recently, is there's a leap with that kind of procedural game, which you make often very late in development, where it goes from being like, ooh, this is pretty and this is neat to wander around, like, where's the game meat to it? Are the fun elements truly going to be fun in it, and or does that procedurally generated content feel interesting to explore and discover, or does it feel like, oh, here's bumpy-headed alien number 715? Seems like really smart guys on that team, so I kind of expect them to make that leap. But it's one I haven't seen yet from that game, but I hope so. Man, I like that kind of game, so I hope that's done. They do that, and I hope they do that really well. I haven't seen as much on the Battalion 1944, but assuming that that's sort of cribbing on the Battlefield games, I really liked the early era of the Battlefields. It blew my mind the first time in Battlefield 2 or where you could see the fact that you could have guys on the ground, guys in jets, guys in and then boats and like destroyers, and it was like,
Yeah,
oh
yeah, I
my
love
god, it was like
Battlefield.
mind blowing to
Battlefield's
do
amazing.
that kind of stuff at the time. And so I'm nostalgic for those games. I wouldn't mind at all seeing them reworked well. But I don't know battalions. I don't want to like hum so many bars of that and then like be talking about something entirely different. The uh, Let me do a super quick search on that. The But I hope it's like that because I think that'd be freaking awesome. The the other thing that really blew my mind in those games is I really like that kind of brand of like 32 person 16v16 shooters because the feel of being on a large battlefield and having a lot of stuff going on around you is great. The feel of having an impact on, so on that kind of large stuff is great. But it's kind of the antithesis of esports. There's not a lot of esports that really focus on that scale because it tends to be tight teams, 4 or 5 person teams. I would love to see more of that branch out where either you're allying multiple teams together, so you can have really, really skilled players, but in sections or squad level kind of stuff, but adding up to be bigger fights and bigger sort of broader picture stuff. Because there's something cool about that, but it does lose a lot of the focus, I guess, of the those really tight games that are involving really super tight gameplay amongst those.
Disabled talent asks, do you think game companies should get more disabled people involved with games and try to come up with new ways to challenge other people like himself so they can take part in
Mm-hmm.
gaming?
The Yeah, I absolutely believe so because I think being as inclusive as possible. I mean, it only makes sense. Like, why do you not want people to play your game in whatever capacity? And from a development standpoint, the one of the ways that if there's any group that you feel is marginalized or not taken seriously, the your company ought to embrace them because then you're going to get an advantage. I mean, just be logical about it. You're going to get an advantage if you're willing to accept people for who they are and their skills. And this is a mental field, if you know what I mean. Like, the brain matters a lot more than the beat puppet that is attached to it.
Yeah, I agree.
And so if you're willing to embrace anybody who's smart or who has good ideas, regardless of sex or creed or color or ability, in terms of physical, then you're gonna win because you can have better people doing stuff on your team than the other group has on their team. So regardless of the morals or the ethics of it, which I also happen to be, a fan of, the just logically, I think it's a damn good thing to embrace. There's some really good guys in the industry actually, suffering disabilities of various kinds, and there's some really good programmers I've worked with going back to Brown, who I respect the hell out of, and one of the great things about the internet is people give a lot less of a crap, about what matters is how you interact with people online. Is much less involved with the physical than I ever used to be. It's not nothing, you know what I mean? Like there's still an impact. Like this as you deal with the issues of controllers or of developers who aren't thinking about like, oh hey, I'm going to do something that I could trivially make it easier for you to use my game, but I'd never thought of it or didn't cross my mind, or I'm an idiot, or I had some reason not to. You still need to struggle with the tail end of that if you're in a classic gamer that isn't helped, whether that's color blindness or whether that's physical disability. And so being inclusive only makes sense. Having people who have various levels of disability on the dev team is useful from another reason. I've seen this multiple times, and that is it makes you think about stuff that you're otherwise not. Tim Kaine, brilliant designer, he has a version of color blindness. And because he was on our team, every time someone came up to him with a design that didn't work well for color blindness, he'd be like, "Hey, cool thing I can't read, go fix it." And it was very helpful having that level of feedback on a regular basis where you end up having better support than most games for that kind of thing because you are thinking of it and you are dealing with it. Some of our biggest fans on WildStar were disabled, and they gave a shit about it every time we screwed something up. And it was like, hey, look, dude, you're not thinking of me. We're like, yes, we are idiots. You've been a fervent supporter of the game for literally years during the course of development.